The forest was alive with the rustle of leaves and the faint scent of damp earth. I had been tracking her for hours, the elusive Vulpine who had become the subject of every whispered legend in our village. They said she was fast as the wind, sly as a fox, and impossibly clever. And yet, when I finally glimpsed her through the dense undergrowth, I couldn't help but notice how small she seemed, barely taller than my knee. She paused atop a moss-covered rock, her golden eyes catching the last streaks of the sun. Her fur gleamed like molten copper in the fading light, and her tail, bushy and tipped with black, flicked impatiently. She tilted her head, and I could almost hear her silent amusement. "You," the look seemed to say. "This is who dared chase me." I clenched my fists, ignoring the instinctive doubt that crept into my chest. "Size isn't everything," I muttered under my breath. The Vulpine tilted her ears, a soft laugh escaping her throat, a sound like chimes shaken by the wind. Then, before I could react, she darted forward, a blur of motion, leaping over fallen logs and disappearing into the shadows. I cursed and sprinted after her. Every muscle in my body screamed, but I refused to let her outpace me. The forest thickened, roots clawing at my boots, branches scratching my face. And still I could hear her laughter, taunting, teasing, almost victorious. Hours passed. By the time night fell, I was scratched, bruised, and drenched in sweat, but I had finally cornered her near a cliff that dropped sharply into a dark, rushing river. The moonlight shone down on her fur, casting an ethereal glow. She crouched low, ready to bolt, her eyes daring me to make a move. "You think your tricks will save you," I shouted, stepping closer. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing, as if amused by my bravado. Then she lunged. Faster than I could react, she was on me, her claws grazing my arms as I stumbled back. I had no time to dodge. Instinct took over. I grabbed her, not with finesse but with sheer desperation, my hands locking around her slender torso. She squirmed, kicking and twisting, letting out a shrill, surprised yelp that cut through the night. Her weight was light, almost deceptively so, but her strength was in her agility. She thrashed, trying to slip free, but I adjusted my grip, anchoring her to the ground with my own momentum. For the first time she couldn't escape. You're stronger than I thought," she hissed, her voice sharp, almost snarling. "And you're not invincible," I replied, keeping her pinned just enough to prevent her from moving freely. For a moment there was silence between us. The only sounds were the river crashing below and the wind rustling the trees. Her golden eyes met mine, bright and furious, but not without a glimmer of respect. "You don't know what you've done," she whispered, a thread of warning in her voice. "Maybe. But I know I'm not letting you go until you explain why you've been terrorizing the village," I said, my tone firm but not cruel. Her ears twitched. She tried to wriggle free again, but I tightened my grip. Slowly, reluctantly, she stopped fighting. The initial panic in her eyes gave way to something else, cautious curiosity. "I needed to see if anyone could catch me," she confessed after a long pause, her voice quieter now. "All the hunters, all the warriors. No one ever managed it. And then you came along." I raised an eyebrow. So this was some kind of game. She let out a soft, almost embarrassed chuckle. "Maybe. Or maybe. Maybe I wanted to see if someone worthy existed." "Worthy?" I asked, puzzled. To keep up with me, she said simply, her golden eyes locking with mine. Most are too slow, too clumsy. But you surprised me. For a moment, the anger and fear I had felt transformed into something else. Pride, maybe, or relief. I had finally reached her, not by size, not by strength alone, but by persistence, by refusing to give up when all signs pointed to failure. She exhaled, relaxing slightly beneath my grip, though her eyes still shone with caution. If you let me go now, will you promise not to chase me again? She asked, her tone softer, almost vulnerable. I considered it. There was something in her eyes, something that told me she wasn't merely a creature of mischief, but one who valued trust, who had tested me not for sport alone, but to find a kindred spirit. I promise, I said finally, loosening my hold just enough for her to get her balance. But only if you promise to stop scaring the villagers. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. I suppose that's fair, she said, a sly grin tugging at her lips. You are persistent, aren't you? And brave enough to hold on, I replied. She laughed softly, a sound that was no longer mocking but warm, almost friendly. Then, with a graceful leap, she bounded up the cliffside, pausing once to look back at me. Perhaps we will meet again, she said, her voice carrying on the wind. And just like that, she vanished into the night. I stayed where I was, catching my breath and nursing my scrapes, but I couldn't help smiling. I had faced the Vulpine, and she had respected me for it. Not because I was the biggest or the strongest, but because I refused to quit. Over the following weeks, the villagers noticed a change. The Vulpine no longer prowled the edges of the forest, and the tales of her taunting and thefts dwindled into memory. Occasionally, I would glimpse a flash of gold fur between the trees, and I would smile, knowing that our paths had crossed in a way that neither of us would forget. It wasn't just about size or speed or strength. It was about persistence, courage, and the understanding that even the cleverest of creatures could be challenged if someone was willing to stand firm. And in that understanding a bond was formed, silent, unspoken, yet undeniable. The Vulpine had laughed at my size, mocked my chances, and yet in the end she had acknowledged me. Not as a foe, not as prey, but as someone worthy. I never saw her again in the same way, and perhaps I never would. But whenever I walked through the forest, I felt her presence, not as a threat, but as a reminder that even the smallest spark of determination could tame the wildest of creatures. And that night under the moonlight I realized something else. Sometimes holding on isn't just about control, it's about earning respect, and in that respect, finding a connection stronger than fear or power. After finally holding the Vulpine down, the initial struggle and tension melted into a moment of understanding. She stopped fighting, her golden eyes reflecting cautious respect. She admitted that she had been testing anyone who dared chase her, looking for someone worthy. I promised to let her go if she stopped scaring the villagers. She agreed, a sly grin tugging at her lips, and gracefully leapt away into the night. From then on, the forest was peaceful, though I occasionally glimpsed her golden fur watching me from the shadows. A reminder that persistence, courage, and respect could tame even the wildest of creatures. The story ends with a silent bond formed between hunter and hunted, proving that size or strength isn't everything. Determination and respect can create connections stronger than fear or power.